This course is presented to you free of charge by TTJ Tech Services of www.ttjtech.biz and by Stir It Up of www.stiritup.com. And remember, stir is spelled with a U, not an I, so that's STURITUP.com. TTJ Tech Services and Stir It Up are pleased to offer this course to you, to the glory of God and to the benefit of all those who listen. All right. Well, praise God and welcome once again. Let me check the audio. Make sure that it's set properly. And I think we're going to go ahead and...
So, no mic done. Button. Speech off.
I don't know if we'll probably do some demos here, but I want to have it set that way just in case. So we are on original sound now. And once again, welcome to TV for the 21st century. This is session number 3 of 4. We only have one more after today of this. Starting next week, we will be doing the HomePod and the Smart Home. That'll be next Monday and Wednesday. And the following week will be our Apple Watch Cafe. And then the week after that, it's time to begin our iPad class. So that is coming up fast. If you have not yet registered for the iPad class, please do so. And remember, if you register and you purchase a gold membership at full price, you'll get a free iPad or a credit towards an iPad, depending on which one you're choosing. I also have one other reminder for you about the Ultimate Tech Showdown this Wednesday. Tomorrow we have a help session. Wednesday we have class, but Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, you're not going to want to miss the Ultimate Tech Showdown. Cliff and myself, as well as 2 other gentlemen, Kevin Ratcliffe and David Goldfield, are going to go head-to-head in this battle of the iPad versus Mac versus PC versus Android, all of these things. It's going to be a lot of fun, but it's also going to be informative for those who are trying to make decisions. You know, we've got more with the Mac JP Reloaded already underway. We've uploaded the first session or 2 of that, I think at least the first session. And, yeah, that's right. And so we're going to be starting iPad for all computing. And you know, there's some people that, well, which one do I choose? Or should I use both? Or do I need both? Or, you know, all these questions. So we're excited about Wednesday night. We really hope you'll attend. It's going to be a lot of fun. All right. Where we last left you with the Apple TV was we had discussed in pretty great detail the TV app. We had discussed the way to watch and hopefully find content. I want to just highlight a few points on that, a little bit of a review, and a few additional points about those things today before we get into some other things. We also discussed playback controls, how you can rewind and fast forward and so on when the content is actually playing. Now, I want to point out about that, and I think I mentioned this last week, or I at least alluded to it, but I want to make a little more detail about it known to you. Depending on the app, the playback controls might look a little bit different. There is a sort of standard set of playback controls that Apple makes available to people to use as app developers, and some app developers absolutely do make use of that. Others kind of choose to go off on their own and make the playback controls look their own way. And if they do that, it may change what is available or the way that you access it. It's always going to it's almost always going to be either swipe or click up or down to get additional menus and so on. But those menus can change, and then, you know, your left and right arrow clicks, you know, will rewind and fast forward and those sorts of things. And we talked about how you can pause and you can, you know, sort of slide your finger along to move on the timeline, and then hit the center button to confirm that change, or hit the back button to cancel out and just pick up where you were before and resume. And there's also what sort of is known as like a jog control, like you can sort of run your finger in a circle to move little by little through playback in certain apps that support that. Again, you can use Siri in many apps. Now, I'll give you a perfect example of an app that has done its own playback controls for very good reason, in my opinion, and that is the DirecTV app, which we've talked a considerable amount about already. The DirecTV service. Their app has essentially the same rewind and fast forward functionality, but the menus are a bit different, and that makes a lot of sense, especially when you're watching live TV. So if you're watching live TV and you swipe down, you get the info tab, which allows you to see in detail what's watching. You can what's currently playing. If it's live TV that you're watching, it'll show you, that information. If it's on demand or whatever, DVR, it still shows you the info about what it is that you're watching, and it has an option to take you to the series page if it's a show. Then the second tab is your CC and audio options. And then there's a third tab with DirecTV, which is your record tab. So while you're playing content, you can actually start recording right then and there. And then there, on many channels, there's actually a fourth tab, and that's the restart tab, because you can restart content that's already in progress. So there's a lot of leeway for app developers to create their own kind of custom menus, and that's very useful. So I've said all that to say, check it out when you're browsing different apps and when you're playing content. And remember, as I said last week, I highly encourage you to pause what is playing when you're going to explore those sort of submenus, at least the first time, because if not, it's going to get pretty chaotic with voiceover talking and stuff. Once you get comfortable with it, you may not have to pause if you know exactly what you want to do. That's fine, but I would at first at least encourage you to do that. I want to say a little bit more about, I know we talked about the Apple TV app, and remember, we typically refer to the hardware as the Apple TV 4K or the Apple TV set-top box. But remember that there is also a service called Apple TV, and it works within the Apple TV app. It used to be called Apple TV Plus. It is Apple's own streaming service. And so I just wanted to remind you of that distinction. It is available as one of the Apple TV channels. I also wanted to remind you that everything that we are discussing on the Apple TV can also be done on the iPad, the iPhone, and the Mac. Much of it can even be done on third-party devices. For example, again, if I go back to DirecTV with their Gemini Air device, you can access the Apple TV app on DirecTV. You can download it from the Play Store, and it has full access to your purchased library. It has full access to any Apple TV channels you might subscribe to, and of course it has access to the Apple TV streaming service content. But it's not just that. So if you have a series that you purchased on Apple TV or a movie, and then you get a DirecTV Gemini Air for a different room of the house or something, and you say, well, now I'm not going to be able to watch my Apple TV content. Yes, actually you will. You still can do that. And it's accessible. This is also true to an extent with Comcast Xfinity X1, although I don't think their version of the Apple TV app does let you access your own library. If I remember correctly, it's just limited to the streaming service and maybe the channels. Some smart TVs also have the Apple TV app, so there's a lot of that. This is very diverse, and there's lots of ways of doing this. Now, I also just want to talk a little bit more about the third-party apps. I've made it very clear that you can have live TV streaming service apps. We gave you a number of examples: DirecTV, Hulu Plus Live TV, YouTube TV, and Fubo, and others. In addition to that, I've made it clear that you have all your streaming service apps, right? Netflix, Prime Video, Disney Plus, Hulu, Peacock, Paramount Plus, HBO Max, all these different, ESPN, all these different streaming services. In addition to that, there's a category of apps known as TV Everywhere apps. This is becoming less and less a thing, and I'll explain why, but it still is a thing. So essentially, you might remember seeing, I don't know how many of you still watch, you know, live TV that had commercials and so on, but you might remember seeing, where you're watching a series and it'll say, catch up on this entire series on demand, or and it'll say like, um, Hallmark Hallmark Now, or the Food Network Go app or something like that, and it's this idea that you can watch the same thing in an app. And so what happens with these TV Everywhere apps, they are live channel apps, but they require a subscription through another provider like DirecTV or Comcast or Spectrum or one of these other cable or satellite providers. And so what happens then is you download the TV Everywhere app, like HGTV Go, for example. You install it, you open it up, and it's going to say, okay, you can watch, the first episode of this free or that free, different. But then to unlock the rest of the content, authenticate with a provider. And so you click on authenticate, and there's a couple of different ways that this will work. The easiest way is through what's called single sign-on. It is an Apple feature, exclusive to Apple. It works with iCloud, so you do it once and it should sync across your devices. But also, basically what it allows you to do is to store your provider login information on the device. And I mentioned to you, if you remember, I know we've covered a lot of stuff, but a little tidbit on our first session, I think last week, I mentioned that during the setup, it's going to ask you to select what live TV provider you have. Well, that's the purpose of that, because many of those live TV providers will allow you to store the credentials on board. Not all of them. In fact, one notable exception is Xfinity. But DirecTV does, Dish Network does, Spectrum does, there's others. And so when you select, let's say, DirecTV, it's going to ask you, okay, enter your DirecTV ID and password. You enter it, and it saves that, and it syncs it with iCloud across all your devices. So now, when you use a TV Everywhere app like Food Network Go or something, it just says, all right, do you want to use your DirecTV login? You say yes or allow, and then it just automatically signs you in. You don't have to do any manual authentication. And this is very useful for these TV Everywhere apps. If you didn't set that up during your initial setup process, or if you changed your TV provider and so on, of course, you can always go into settings and you can update that or add it later. It's under settings, and then I think it's called users and accounts, and then or user accounts, something like that, and then you just select TV provider, and you can add or edit or change or remove or whatever your provider. If you have a provider that does not support the single sign-on feature, then there's a different sort of workflow to this. And it is basically that it's going to present a code on the screen, and it's going to say, okay, pick up a mobile device or a computer and go to, let's say it's like foodnetwork.com/activate or something. I don't remember specifically what the Food Network activation address is, so I might be wrong, but that's the gist of it, foodnetwork.com/provider or authenticate or active, whatever. So you go to that website, and it's going to say, enter the code that's displayed on your TV screen. So you enter this code, it's like a one-time use code, and then it's going to have you do the sign in and verification on your phone or your iPad, and you sign in, and then it lets your TV know you're good to go, and it'll say, all right, you've successfully authenticated, your TV will refresh in a moment, and it does, within just a few seconds, and then you're signed in also. That's a little bit of a longer way than the single sign-on, but it does work. Now, there are other ways to sign in, and I'm going to talk a little about those too, but I just want to say about TV Everywhere, the reason I told you I'd explain why that's getting to be less and less a thing. It's getting to be less and less a thing because so many of the streaming providers that offer live TV are now offering their own apps, like DirecTV. It has its own app for the Apple TV, so you really don't need to use like Food Network Go, because you can use DirecTV and access all the Food Network content on demand or live. And it kind of has sort of minimized the need for that. For that TV Everywhere experience. There was a time when the TV Everywhere apps may have given you more content on demand than the live TV streaming apps. I don't really think that's true anymore. I think they're pretty much even. And the the live TV streaming apps may give you other additional advantages, right? Being able to DVR something so your library gets even bigger, or not having to authenticate a bunch of times because you just do it once and you're in for all of your 300 and some odd channels, right? And so, to the degree that there is live TV viewers, which there still is, it's decreased significantly because you have all these streaming services. But to the degree that there is live TV being watched, it makes more sense, in my opinion, to watch it in the service app like DirecTV. And a lot of people have agreed with that. And so you're seeing the TV everywhere support sort of minimize, decrease, diminish a little bit. In fact, what is it now? It used to be Viacom, but I guess they're all part of Paramount, CBS, all that whole, conglomerate. They did away with most of their TV Everywhere apps. Like there used to be a Nick app for Nickelodeon. There used to be a Comedy Central app. Those have all been deprecated, and they tell you just watch the content in the live TV app, like DirecTV, or subscribe to Paramount Plus, because Paramount Plus has Comedy Central and Nickelodeon, content. And I want to talk about that in a moment too, just to let you know. I sort of think we did a little of that last week, but I want to do it again and in a bit more detail. And in fact, let's do that now. I want to talk about, so just so you understand what you're getting with some of these live TV streaming services. I think Netflix is pretty obvious. Amazon Prime is pretty obvious, but it has a lot of additional content with Prime channels, and with the fact that they've acquired MGM, I believe it is, which used to be, oh my, what was MGM before it was that? I think, well, they always had MGM, but I think those people acquired Epix or Epic, something like that. I don't even remember now. But anyway, another example of this is Paramount Plus. When you subscribe to Paramount Plus, you're getting Paramount content, you're getting CBS content, you're getting Nickelodeon, Comedy Central, BET, you're getting MTV, you're getting Smithsonian Channel. There may even be a couple others that I'm forgetting, but you're getting all of this under one umbrella, Paramount Plus. Now, you might not get every like, for example, what they're famous for doing is, like, let's say Smithsonian Channel has like Air Disasters, Aerial America, these kinds of things. Well, let's suppose that there's like 20 seasons of a show, and the 20th one is the current season. It's still airing. So what these streaming service apps might do is they might give you 1 through 19 full seasons you can watch anytime. 20 is not available unless you have the live channel, but by next season, then 20 will be available when they're filming 21. So it's sort of like that in a lot of cases. Another one is Discovery Plus, and that has in it the Discovery Channel, Food Network, HGTV, Cooking Channel, Magnolia Network. It has Destination America, and I think they've even, Animal Planet. That's another one. I think they've even put some of the possibly some of the A&E content in there, and Lifetime, but I might be wrong on that one. That's Discovery Plus, and you can get a lot of that content on HBO Max right now also, although I shared with you last week, I don't know if that's going to continue to be the case when the two companies separate. But HBO Max, either way, has HBO. It has Cinemax content. It has True TV. It has TBS, TNT. It's got all of this content and more. Others I'm probably forgetting. I think they removed there used to be CNN content in there, but I think CNN has its own now streaming service. There's another one, Peacock. So Peacock has a lot of its own content. It has NBC, Universal, it has Hallmark, it has the live NBC channel, depending on which package you get. So again, just tons and tons of content there. One of the newest onto the scene is Fox One, and that includes Fox, it includes Fox News, it includes Fox Nation, it includes the outdoor component of that, whatever that's called. That might actually be Fox Nation, but I thought there was another outdoor component to that. They have a live Fox affiliate, I believe. Um, and then I'm sure there's some I'm forgetting. Disney Plus, that's a big one. So you can have Hulu, Disney Plus, ESPN, which has its own service as well, ESPN Unlimited. Um, Disney Plus also gives you National Geographic content and Pixar and Marvel, and there's so much content in these in these on-demand streaming services, and I would highly encourage you to to consider some of them, try them out. The nice thing about them is most of them offer free trials, if not all. All of them are very easy to cancel if you don't want to keep them. Um, the easiest ones to cancel, of course, are the ones that you subscribe through Apple. But even if you don't, they're usually fairly easy. I had to cancel Netflix not because I didn't want to keep Netflix, but because I was getting it in a different way. I used to get it through Comcast, and now I get it through DirecTV. So rather than wait and just I just canceled one account and signed up with another because we didn't have a huge watch list or anything. And so when I did that, I didn't have much difficulty canceling the account at all. And so, it took under 5 minutes anyway, probably less than two, I would guess. But if there was any time taken there, it was just finding where to do it. But it wasn't, it's not a high pressure environment anymore because you don't have to call these places. And quite honestly, even the places that you do have to call, like the cable companies and so forth, they've really gotten rid of that sort of high pressure experience because they understand. They realize it's a changing landscape. Of course, they want your business, but they're going about trying to get it in a positive, aggressive sort of way by lowering prices, by offering bundles, by offering more for your money rather than trying to pressure you into staying. It took me, just a handful of minutes to cancel my Xfinity service. And to be clear, for those who are Xfinity customers, I didn't cancel because I was dissatisfied. I liked Xfinity. They are a good service, and I still think they're one of the best in the nation. We had an opportunity to switch to a local internet provider run by people who live in our area, who are Bible believing people, who are native to this area, who are invested in this area, and I wanted to support that. Not only that, but I thought I could lower prices by unbundling and by switching to a live TV streaming service, and that's exactly what we've done. Praise God, our prices are lower, not hundreds of dollars a month lower. You have to pay for decent service, but definitely lower than what we were paying, and we get every bit, if not more. So, it wasn't if you have Comcast, don't think to yourself, well, maybe I need to leave because he did. No, it wasn't a problem with Comcast, right? It was just, I saw some other opportunities I wanted to take. So, but when I did cancel Comcast, though, they were very cordial, very friendly, and I just told them it's not, going to work. And they said, if you ever change your mind, you can always come back to us. We'll be here. And yeah, that's true. Absolutely. So, the whole landscape of this has changed quite significantly, but I did want to go over some of those streaming service apps again, what you get. And as I said to you last week, but I want to say it again, one of the things I think is the best thing to do, and we offer this service free. If you want to contact us, we'll help you through it, but think about the things you like to watch, channels, shows, those things. Because some people will say, well, I have to have my, fix of Grey's Anatomy or whatever. Well, then find out where Grey's Anatomy is airing so that you make sure you don't miss it. You subscribe to that service. And you just kind of go through these things and think about it. And it'll help you to make some good decisions about what you are going to subscribe to. Now, these streaming services like Disney Plus and Paramount and all these other ones, they have some unique ways of signing in on the Apple TV. Almost always you can manually enter the information, type it on your remote, dictate it, whatever, continuity keyboard, like we talked about before. A lot of them now are also allowing you to authenticate from a mobile device. So if you have, let's say, HBO Max installed on your iPhone or iPad, as long as the HBO Max app on your iPhone or iPad is signed into the correct account, and it's on the same Wi-Fi network as your Apple TV, when you open your Apple TV, you can sign into HBO Max on the TV using the app on your iPhone or iPad. So what it'll say is just open the HBO Max app on your iPhone or whatever, and when you do, your phone or your iPad is going to prompt you. It's going to say, hey, look, there's an Apple TV trying to sign in to your account. Do you want to allow it? And you say allow, and it's done. It's so much easier than having to type in the information. There's also a lot of times now that there's a QR code for these apps. That's another way you can do it. And so instead of having to manually type the web address of, like hbomax.com/authenticate or whatever it is, I don't know. You can use your phone by scanning the QR code, go to the control center, pick the code scanner. If you don't have the code scanner in your control center, you can add that from settings. Again, this is on your iPhone or iPad, and then you can scan that and it'll take you directly to the website. Sometimes you'll still have a code to enter, but this is typically a set it and forget it kind of thing. Once it's done, you're signed in, you're good to go. Now, what about those codes? There are these one-time use codes. They display on your screen. It's some XJKBH79 or something, And what if I need to hear those again with VoiceOver? How do I do that? Well, you have a couple options. Most of the time, if you press and hold the play pause button, that's the second one down on the left, remember, VoiceOver will reread the screen for you. And that's the easiest way. And usually that works. The app developers have figured out how to present their code in a way that VoiceOver can read it letter by letter. But every once in a while, maybe one isn't presented that way. And it says like, abskibj, right? Instead of reading letter by letter. Well, what is that, right? You can't use that. So how do I read a code letter by letter if, in fact, I have to? And the answer is, this is the reason we have navigation mode and exploration mode. This is the time when you're going to want to put two fingers on that click pad and do a two-finger triple tap. That is, tap 3 times with 2 fingers to switch from navigation mode to exploration mode. You'll perform the same gesture again later to switch back. But when you're in exploration mode, you can swipe around and not actually move. It's just going to read what's on the screen. This is where you have a rotor. The rotor doesn't really do much in navigation mode. If you have VoiceOver settings in the rotor, like speaking rate and things of that nature, they will be available in navigation mode. But most of the rotor, most of the things you add like characters, words, and stuff like that, will not be available in navigation mode, but will be available in exploration mode. So once you have done that 2-finger triple tap and it says exploration mode, now you rotate 2 fingers. You can go to characters if you've added characters to the rotor. Just like on your iPhone or iPad, you can do this stuff through settings and accessibility and VoiceOver and, add things to the rotor. And so if you have characters in there, you can, swipe left and right. So first you're going to do that 2-finger triple tap. You're going to swipe left and right until you're on the code, and then set the rotor to characters and swipe up or down with 1 finger to read character by character, just like you do on an iPhone or an iPad. So that's the kind of reason for exploration mode, when you need to do things like that. And again, when you're finished, don't forget to do the 2-finger triple tap again to put it back into navigation mode. Now, occasionally you'll hear, while you're in navigation mode, that this little sound that reminds you of the quick nav sound on your iPhone or iPad, and the remote won't seem to function normally. You'll hear bloop, and then all of a sudden it's like when you move left or right, it's not moving or something. What's happened there? Well, either you accidentally did this, or somehow the remote interpreted that you wanted the rotor. Because if you put 2 fingers on the remote and like, as I said, there are some rotor options available in navigation mode, but just not as many. So it thinks you wanted the rotor for some reason. Well, the quickest way to stop that and get back to normal navigation is, I think it's the down arrow of the click pad that I press to get out of that if I've accidentally done that. But the other thing is, if you just wait for 3 seconds, it will go away. The rotor will only stay on the screen for 3 seconds of inactivity, and then it will return you to the normal navigation. So if you accidentally or inadvertently trigger the rotor while you're in navigation mode, just wait and it'll go away. Now, there is a setting in VoiceOver settings that I want to talk to you about, and it's called Read Screen After Delay. I don't know as this is available in your, if it is, I'd say it's probably in your verbosity settings, but My recollection is that it's not. I think you can only access it by putting it in the rotor. It's on by default, but I also think it's in the rotor by default. I don't remember. I've removed it from the rotor because I never want this off. I always want it on. What read screen after delay does is automatically, when you open, like, let's say, a movie poster or a TV show page, it'll automatically start reading the about information, about the movie and stuff like that. And I want it to do that. So I like to have read screen after delay turned on. And as I said, by default, if I recall correctly, it's in the rotor. And then I just made sure that it was on, and then I took it out of the rotor because I don't want to accidentally turn it off. Audio ducking is another one of those things, right? I don't like audio ducking. I'm not a fan of it. It's not a criticism of it. It's fine for people who need it, and certainly there are some who do or who think that they do, but I'm not a fan of it. So I turned it off. I don't have it in the rotor. I have no use for it, and it's as simple as that. Now, what if you're annoyed by, the idea that VoiceOver reads the time stamps and all that stuff? Well, first of all, let me say, if you leave the remote alone during normal operation, that's really not going to happen that much. Depending on the app, it can vary a little, but for the most part, it's not going to happen much. It will happen at the beginning of a program. It may happen at the end of a program. And in some apps, it will happen at ad breaks. The only other times it's going to happen is when you touch the remote. If you touch the ClickPad, it brings up the video controls, the playback controls. And so then VoiceOver is going to read them to you. Or if you hit the pause button, it's going to read the playback controls because they appear. And it's a great way, like when you're watching a movie, sometimes somebody will say, I want to go make a snack, or I need to go do this or that. But how long is left in this? Let's see first so I can decide when I'm going to go. So you'll just touch the ClickPad. You don't have to click it. You just touch it, and it brings up the playback controls for a few seconds. VoiceOver reads that. That's why I say leave the remote alone, and it won't read a lot of times to you. But if it's still too much for you, if it's just not, if it's just bothering you, you can always turn VoiceOver off while you're watching your movie, your show. Just set the easiest way is to set the accessibility shortcut to VoiceOver, so you can just triple click that back button in the upper left, and then turn VoiceOver off, watch your movie, watch your show, and then turn VoiceOver back on. It's as simple as that. Most movies and shows will autoplay another program or episode after the one you're currently watching, and so most apps will do that. A lot of times you can disable that if you don't want that, but that is usually default behavior. Now, if you happen to be watching a movie or a show and somebody says to you, there's this box on the screen and it just won't go away, usually that is VoiceOver doing that, because it's either the VoiceOver cursor or for some reason the app is keeping the playback controls on the screen because VoiceOver's on. They're supposed to go away, but app developers may or may not be aware of that. If it doesn't seem like it's going away, you have a couple of options. Try swiping up or down, because it very well could be you're just in a menu. Also, you can try pressing the back button, because sometimes you have to press the back button to get the menu to go away. If none of that seems to work after a couple of attempts, again, you can always turn VoiceOver off. And that's, of course, most pressing when you have sighted users watching content with you. Now, another thing I wanted to highlight today is a little bit about AirPods. The Apple AirPods work brilliantly with the Apple TV, just as they do with all other Apple devices. And they're not going to automatically start playing, but you can go into your control center or your audio controls, and you can pick the AirPods. When you are using AirPods, then the Apple TV does support Hey You Know Who, SIRI. And you can use some third-party headphones in similar ways. And also, you can even have multiple pairs of it. Like, you can have two sets of AirPods, so two people can be listening. You can use Bluetooth speakers. I told you already you can use the HomePods as speakers, and of course, there's other options as well. As you can see, we're doing some highlights here. We're going to get into a couple other things, though, in a bit, but just a couple of more little highlights. I did want to talk about I did want to talk about AirPlay a little bit more because I just mentioned the HomePods as speakers. So that's one thing that you can do. Also, however, you can use AirPlay in a number of ways. So the first thing that you can do is you can use AirPlay to play the audio of your TV shows and movies through various HomePods, either individually or simultaneously. And not only HomePods, but other speakers that support AirPlay 2 technology. And these include most of the recent Sonos speakers, not just the Sonos soundbars, but also, some of the other Sonos models. They also include a lot of other third-party audio systems that have AirPlay 2 capabilities. So this is different from making the HomePods your actual TV speakers, because that's a semi-permanent solution. A semi-permanent because obviously you can go in and change the setting anytime, but it's a setting that stays. And voiceover and everything will come out the HomePods when you set it that way. But you can also do on-demand AirPlay, and this is especially useful if you don't always want the HomePods to be your TV speakers. That's how I do it, mainly because there was a particular tvOS version a while back that was having some issues when using the HomePods as speakers in certain apps. I believe it was eventually corrected, praise God, but during that time, I started using this sound bar, and I've just kept using it because everybody likes it, and it's fine, and it for TV, they just really like it, so we use it. But sometimes I want the HomePods to play the sound. For example, Super Bowl. We have people over, we have a Super Bowl party, watching the Super Bowl, eating our snacks. We want that nice big sound, and we even want it in other rooms, so you can go out to the kitchen and get your food and not miss the Super Bowl. So with AirPlay, you can route the audio to various AirPlay-enabled speakers throughout the home. You can even select multiple AirPlay speakers for multi-room audio. And so the way you do that, there's two different ways. One is you can do it through the control center. Remember, you press and hold the TV button. It brings up Control Center. And I'm going to look here what it's called. It's going to be under Control Center. I'm looking. Okay. It's not. Oh, I think it's just called Audio. I think you go into Audio. Yeah. Yep, you just go into Audio and under the Control Center, and then it has TV speakers and it has all your other AirPlay-enabled devices listed. I have them listed by the rooms they're in, so it shows me basement, kitchen, living room, master bathroom, master bedroom, all the different rooms we have, and I can select any of those AirPlay devices or all of them, and have the audio throughout the house, or I can choose TV speakers instead, and it's one or the other, but I can select multiple AirPlay devices, and so that's another way to do it. Now, the other way to access those AirPlay options will sometimes be through the audio section of the playback controls. Remember how I said you can swipe down or sometimes up when a movie or show is playing, and you can get the different controls, and one of the tabs is audio. Some of the times you'll see the playback destination in there as well. But the control center is the sure way to do it, and you can bring that up from anywhere. Now, another thing that AirPlay allows you to do is not only to play the TV content on other speakers, and that's so useful, right? Another example of a time that I have used that, and I don't typically do it much now because our soundbar is really good and it's close enough that I don't need to, but sometimes I have, if I'm like eating lunch in the kitchen but I want to watch a show on the Apple TV, well, I don't really need to see the show, so I would put the TV show on the kitchen HomePods, something like that. And again, a great example, the kids will say, go make me a snack, and I'll say, okay, I'll do it, but we got to pause the show. Well, they don't want to pause the show, they want to keep watching, so I'll say, well, then let me put the sound on the kitchen too, so I can hear it, So that's a nice example. But another thing that AirPlay does is it allows you to use whatever speakers your Apple TV is using. to play content from other devices. So I might have something on my phone, and I might want to play that on larger speakers. Now, in our case, we have HomePods in the living room, in the kitchen, basically all over the house. So I would probably not use the TV in that instance, but I could, and you may if you don't have other speakers, but maybe your Apple TV is connected to whatever you consider to be the best speakers in the house, and so you want to play something from your phone or your iPad on the best speakers in the house. So you can use the Apple TV for audio AirPlay. And then the other component of AirPlay that's sort of under the AirPlay category, but it's not found in quite the same place. It's officially known as screen mirroring. And we'll talk more about this in our iPad class. I think we talked about it in our iPhone voiceover class. But screen mirroring allows you to mirror whatever is on your iPhone or iPad screen onto the Apple TV. And not only the visual, but the audio as well. And so this is useful if you want to, maybe you want to show everybody a website that you're looking at in Safari. So you can AirPlay that to the TV with screen mirroring, and it will allow you to show that to everybody. And there's usually a code the first time you ever do it. With a particular Apple TV, it'll say enter this pairing code, and then you just do that, and then it works. There are even apps that have sort of a deliberate design to be used with screen mirroring so that they have like a second screen experience, so that the content will mirror to the Apple TV, but there'll be different content on the screen of the phone. And there are some games that have really taken advantage of this type of thing directly in the app. One in particular that I can think of, and I think it's called Sketch Party TV. And it's sort of like the equivalent of the win, lose, or draw games that you used to see. And so you can draw on your iPad with the Apple Pencil, and that drawing shows up on the TV for everybody to look at, but they don't see the clue or the hint that you got in order to draw. They don't know what you're drawing, and they can guess, and it's really fun. There's another one called, I think it's called Pictionary Air, and I think that one streams to the Apple TV with screen mirroring. So there are some fun use cases for this. Now, having said all that, let's go back to the Apple TV itself, where a lot of stuff doesn't have to be mirrored anymore because the Apple TV is so capable. So, for example, photos. The moment you hear screen mirroring, it probably comes to your mind, well, that's a great way for me to show my photos on my Apple TV. And certainly, if you have somebody who's not already a member of the household, that would be the way to do it. But for anybody who's actually signed into the Apple TV with their Apple account, you don't even need to screen mirror because all your photos are available on the Apple TV so long as you are using iCloud Photos. So if you have iCloud Photo Library enabled, you can open up your Photos app, and everything that you have on your phone or iPad is available on the Apple TV. You can watch photos, you can watch videos, you can watch memories with the music and everything. You can do all of these things on the Apple TV itself. And so that's a convenient way to watch and view your photos and so on. And in addition to that, you can use photos and so on as your screensaver for your Apple TV if you so choose. Similarly, game playback. There are so many games now that are available directly on the Apple TV, especially with Apple Arcade. And Apple Arcade is a subscription service. It has hundreds of games available, with more being released constantly, like every month almost. And the accessibility of these games kind of varies because a lot of them are extremely visual, and the visuals are beautiful and the audio is great, but it may require sighted help. Not a lot of them have great accessibility as yet, but there might be some. And I would also say that a lot of there's some third-party games that are not Apple Arcade, and they have different degrees of accessibility, some more than others. If you find word games and clue games and those kinds of things, trivia games, they typically are going to have the best accessibility. Let me just look at some of my apps here because I can give you, because some of you are going to ask me for recommendations. So let's see. Okay. I don't know about. Well, this is not a game, but I will point out the Bible app is great on the Apple TV. Has good Bible stories and video and so forth. I mentioned the Canary app, which I mentioned Bon Appetit. These are useful, but not games. Let me go. Okay, Hangman I think is accessible, if I remember. Oh, you got Grubhub. You can order food on the Apple TV. Okay, my Apple TV, my Apple Arcade folder has 19 apps that we've downloaded for Apple Arcade, so that's cool. Fibbage, that's a great game. We play that a lot, and Fibbage uses the phones or iPads, but not through screen mirroring. But what happens is the Fibbage app kind of reminds you of Balderdash for those who have ever played that game, except it's questions and answers. It's not like words and definitions, but each person makes up a lie answer to try to fool the rest of the group, and then there's one correct answer. So you get points if you tricked everyone, you get points if you get the correct answer, you get points if other people like your fake answer. There's all sorts of ways you can earn points and win this game. But it's a lot of fun to play with the family and friends, and what it does is it lets you enter the information on your iPhones or iPads. So you open the app and it'll tell you go to this website on your iPad or iPhone and enter this code. It's like a room code. For those who are familiar with education, it's sort of like that Kahoot system, where you have a quiz that the teacher makes, and then the students can do the quiz on their phones or iPads in a game format or on their Chromebooks or whatever. Well, that's the same idea here. So Fibbage is fun, and it works accessibly with VoiceOver on the phone and stuff. And the guy reads the questions and everything, so you could play that even if you had multiple people who couldn't see. You should be fine to play that. There's one here called Family Trivia Night, and I just haven't played it in a while. I seem to remember it being accessible. But, we have sighted family and friends, praise God, so I don't get too concerned about it. But I'm trying to remember ones to tell you that I know you could play either way. I want to talk about Magic Fireplace in a minute, because that's fun, but not what I... Phrase Party, I think, is accessible. If you ever remember the game Catchphrase, it's kind of like that, but I guess they weren't the same company, so they couldn't use the name. But it's very similar to that, and it's on the Apple TV. And then the Sketch Party I told you about. I actually have, I know this isn't games, but the SiriusXM app and the Pandora app for music. Of course, the Apple Music app I'll talk about in a minute. I was just trying to go through some of these games very quickly. I have the Kenneth Copeland Ministries app, which is also a Christian app. I have the Amber Recipe app. Remember I told you about Ombre or Amber before if you took our voiceover class, and we'll talk about it again in the iPad class. It is a great recipe app, and it actually has an Apple TV app, so you can have your recipes on the big screen and your cooking instructions. And here, too, is now this one's a game. It's called Spellstruck. Let me just take... Oh, here's a bowling game. We have a lot of games, but I don't know why that one's not in its Apple Arcade folder. I'll have to move it. One I wanted to tell you about, which I don't know if it is... I don't know that I'd call it fully accessible. It's pretty visual anyway, but it's really neat if you have sighted family, if you have kids. It's called Beasts of Balance. This is one of the neatest implementations I've ever seen of a game for the Apple TV, because it has a physical board game, and the board game takes batteries, and you put the battery in, or batteries in, and you connect it to your Apple TV with a simple like pairing method that it shows you when you open the app or whatever. The idea of Beasts of Balance is you're creating these characters, and the game comes with a bunch of character game pieces, and you can actually buy expansion packs if you want more characters. And they have sort of like real characters like Shark and Bear and um, other ones, and then they have some fictional characters that they make up when you combine the characters. And as you're putting them on the board, they come to life on the Apple TV. And they have to be, their lives have to be sustained by either food, water, or air. And you have pieces that indicate food, water, and air, or land, water, and air, something like that. And so you have to feed them with the appropriate piece, or they start to, their life starts to dwindle away, and eventually you'll lose the character in the game until you start the game over. And so you have to keep them alive. But combined with this aspect of the gameplay is the strategy of building them physically onto the board, the game board, because you stack them up. And so you have to figure out ways to stack them without the whole thing falling. And if they fall, you lose the game. And the Apple TV knows when they fall. And so there's a lot of components to this. As I said, it's one of, in my opinion, the best, most creative games that I've ever seen for the Apple TV. And it really is a lot of fun. And you can also play the game on your iPhone or iPad. There's different modes. It's really cool. But my kids play it, and my wife and I like to watch it being played, and we get it out periodically, and it's really fun. So Beasts of Balance, that's another one. If you're looking for something to get somebody for next Christmas or a birthday or something, I highly recommend it. You can purchase the game online, and as I said, you can get expansion packs for it as well. So I want to go back to the sort of built-in apps in a moment, but I just want to mention a couple others that are not games but also important. Multiple different recipe apps like Yumly in the kitchen, the Bon Appetit app, and then I told you about, of course, Amber. I told you about the SiriusXM, Pandora. I have a couple weather apps, Carrot Weather, which is this forecasting robot or something, so he's got character to him and that sort of thing. And of course the Weather Channel, and you can ask SIRI for weather reports as well. What else did I tell you? Oh, the Magic Fireplace. That will display a fireplace on your TV screen, complete with the crackling fireplace sound. And for a small one-time in-app purchase, you can unlock a number of different fireplaces with different sounds and different looks, and sometimes different colors, I believe. And one of my favorite things about this app is you can play your music over top of it. So you can actually be playing Apple Music content while the crackling fireplace is going on too. And then there are aquariums and other types of scenes that you can purchase, with different apps for your Apple TV as well. Now I want to go back to the built-in apps. So we've talked about TV extensively. There used to be movies and TV shows as separate apps on the home screen of the Apple TV. They have now all been configured to take you into the TV app. When you open them, it'll just say this content has been moved to the TV app, and you can choose to view it or whatever. I assume maybe eventually they will remove those icons, but because they're not needed anymore, because you just use the TV app for everything. The Music app. So that is great. It has, especially if you are an Apple Music subscriber, it has access to the full range of Apple Music features and services, iCloud playlists, your entire library. It has access to Apple Music Radio and all the, excuse me, just all the stuff that Apple Music offers. So it's best if you are a subscriber. If you're not, you can still access purchased content. And, of course, you can access music from your phone through AirPlay and things of that nature. But Apple Music is great with the subscription. The app is great with the subscription on the Apple TV. And I would point out that it's beautiful. Cover art and so forth will be displayed on the screen. You can even leave the app and the music will keep playing. I told you already about Apple Music Sing, which, if you recall, is the karaoke feature. They've actually put a separate icon on the home screen for that, which takes you into the Music app, but directly to the Sing tab. They have playlists that are, designed with music that supports all the karaoke features, because not all music does support all the features, but they have playlists of music that do, and they'll categorize it, like best duets or best party anthems or, best holiday. I don't know. I'm just, things like that, right? Coming up with stuff. And so when you pick those, again, as I said, you can reduce the vocal volume and show the lyrics, which are time synced, so it'll show you when to sing what. I kind of think you're going to want to turn voiceover off when you're doing that, because if I remember correctly, if you leave voiceover on, it's going to read the lyrics if they're showing on the screen, and that may not be the best way to do it. It might be helpful, but probably not. So you can always just turn voiceover off when that's happening. And then remember, you can sing just for fun like that, and then you can also use your iPhone camera and video yourself singing, or use the iPhone as a microphone. I don't believe you can do both simultaneously from what I've read and what I've experienced, but you can do one or the other. And if you use the microphone, you can actually hear yourself singing on the TV, which is kind of neat. Speaking of camera, let's jump to the FaceTime app for a moment. Yes, the Apple TV has a FaceTime app. As of the recording of this session and the live teaching of this session here in January 2026, there's no built-in camera in the Apple TV. A lot of rumors have swirled around about an eventual Apple TV set-top box with a built-in FaceTime camera. I don't know if they're true or not. But in the interim, the way that you use the FaceTime app on your Apple TV is with the camera from your iPhone or your iPad. And they call that continuity camera. And so the first time you, well, not really the first time, I guess, anytime you open the FaceTime app on your Apple TV, it's going to ask you to calibrate, basically. Put the phone in front of the Apple TV so it can learn kind of where the camera is. You can skip that step if you don't want to do that, but it can be helpful. And so you can do your iPad, you can do your iPhone. It has center stage, so it'll try to keep you in view. And you can even transfer a call that's in progress to your Apple TV. And so then you'll hear the audio of the other person from your TV speakers or soundbar or HomePods or whatever. But visually, you can see it on the screen. They'll see you because, again, you're using your iPhone's camera or your iPad's camera. And so this is a nice experience. It's neat to be able to talk sort of on your TV in a manner of speaking. Again, you'll see the other person on the TV and hear the audio through the TV speakers or whatever you have for your speakers. I've talked about photos. I've talked about music. I've talked about FaceTime. Here's the Fitness app. This works with an Apple Fitness Plus subscription. You can use this with your Apple Watch, and that's great because you can watch these workout videos complete with music on the Apple TV while you are exercising, and your Apple Watch is keeping track of your exercise. So that's a neat feature. That's the Fitness app. Okay, the App Store is pretty self-explanatory. That's where you get a lot of these third-party apps, right, or all of them. And then there's the search one. I told you about search before. It's just another way of accessing sort of a universal search. I typically don't use that as a standalone feature. I do it either through the TV app or through SIRI, but, personal preference. And then I want to tell you about computers. There's an icon on your home screen here called Computers. Now, Computers uses a thing called home sharing. Here's the scenario. I have content on my computer that cannot be watched on the Apple TV for one reason or another. Maybe it is home movies of my child's band concert or chorus concert or birthday party. But I didn't have them in the Photos app because for whatever reason, we just didn't do it that way. Maybe they came from a different camera and I just didn't think about the fact that I could transfer them to my Photos app or whatever, right? For some reason, it's videos, or maybe it's, home movies that you got somewhere else. I'm not here to condemn or condone, the legality of what you did or didn't do, but you have home movies on your computer or movies that for some reason can't be played directly on the Apple TV. You can stream those movies from your Mac or PC to your um, Apple TV. And similarly, you can do that with music and photos as well. Now, the key things are that you have to have your Mac or PC turned on when you want to do this, and it's got to be signed in with the same Apple account and on the same Wi-Fi network. This is not a feature that I use often, but there are one or two things that I'd gotten from other sources years ago that I can't, put directly onto the Apple TV, like a really nice Titanic documentary. And so basically, I just, okay, let's see. I'm looking to see if Trainer Cliff, I guess he may not be available yet. I'll check the room and see if he's in here, but I was going to have him do a little presentation if he is here. If not, we'll do that on Wednesday. But so that's what Computers does. It gives you access to home sharing. Within that app, you can access the movies and the shows and so forth, the music, whatever, on the computer. And you can set that up within the individual apps. I think your PC users still have an iTunes app, so that's what they would use. But your Macintosh users would just use the individual app, like the music app or the TV app. So that those apps have a particular option for that and for home sharing. And again, that's the correct title of it. And it is called home sharing. Looks to me, let's see, like that was a phone call that I'm very interested to see if it's what I think it is. Uh, okay, yeah, because I got a text message. Let's see if the text message says what I think it's going to say. Yep, we just got the message. I didn't read enough of it with the preview, so I had to open the message. What I think it's going to tell us is that we have another virtual school day tomorrow. Our kids are home, and my wife is home today. That's a lot of fun having them home, praise God. And I think it's going to be the same tomorrow because, well, it's not the message preview. It's the fact that they don't put the whole message in the message anymore. They send you a link. That's weird. Honey, is it closed tomorrow? It is virtual. All right, praise God. They get another day off. I mean, they have to do their work at home, but that's nice because we got about maybe 10 to 12 inches of snow, and there's extreme cold. I think that's the big thing, like single-digit highs maybe. Honey, you should let them know it was better when they put the whole message in the text, not make you have to click the link. But yeah, I mean, they didn't ask me what I thought, so it's okay. It's all good. All right, so anyway, so folks, that's sort of an overview. I am going to check here in a minute and see if Trainer Cliff is here, because if he's not, we'll have his presentation on Wednesday. It sort of goes with that home sharing thing, so I'm going to ask all of you to bear with me for about 30 seconds while I check and see if he's here.
Speech on and more. Audio settings. Noise.
Okay. Let's check it out, see if he's here. And if he's not, all right, I don't see him, but we do have Trainer Sarah, who I'll go ahead and make a co-host now, since I'm already in the list. And then I did just want to tell you about so Trainer Cliff's presentation, just so you know, no reason to keep you in the dark about it, has to do with other ways that you can watch home movies without having to use home sharing. There's a particular app called Infuse that he's going to talk about on Wednesday, and it basically allows you to stream your home movies from third-party cloud services like Dropbox, for example, as well as from what are known as network attached storage, or NAS devices. These are essentially hard drives that connect to your Wi-Fi system, And so you can, get like a 4 terabyte or an 8 terabyte NAS and put all your home movies on it. And then the Infuse app will play the contents. Cliff will talk about that and maybe demo that a little bit on Wednesday. And I also want to talk to you about one other thing that I consider to be a sort of last option contingency way to use your Apple TV, but something that I still think I should mention. If you don't have a live TV streaming service app, but you still want to get live TV channels, there is a possibility that you will be able to get them over the air using an over-the-air antenna. Now, you have to check what's available, and sometimes you can use an indoor antenna, sometimes you need an outdoor antenna, depending on your area and the distance, from the broadcast towers and what have you. And, there's a lot of factors in this. Some places don't have any over-the-air channels available. But if you do, you can purchase a device called an HD Home Run. There are different models of it. There's one model that actually has support for cable cards, so you can watch your cable TV package on your Apple TV. Now that, while there's no right or wrong, it's all personal preference, and I'm not going to tell you what to do, that I don't recommend. Because if you're already paying for a cable service, you might as well use that money on a satellite or cable service or live streaming service that has an Apple TV app. And you're going to get a much better experience than with a cable card, because cable cards can't do on demand and other things like that. So if you're going that route, I would recommend just pay for DirecTV Stream or YouTube TV or something else. But the other HD Home Run models support over-the-air antennas. And if that's what you use, there's an app called Channels that you can download for the Apple TV. What you do is you buy this HD Home Run box and connect it to your Wi-Fi router via Ethernet. Then you connect the over-the-air antenna to the HD Home Run box through a special port that it's got. Now your HD over-the-air antenna is on your Wi-Fi network, and once it's set up properly, the Apple TV can access it through the Channels app. Now, there's some real caveats here. It's not as seamless of an experience as if you were to use a separate, app designed for this, because, for example, the DVR, it doesn't have its own built-in DVR in the cloud like a lot of these other apps do. You have to use like a computer as a DVR if you wanted to do that. So there are some, limitations, but, again, as a sort of a contingency option, I said all that to say that it is possible to watch over-the-air channels on your Apple TV if you must. All right, so I'm going to sort of go to Sarah here and say hi, and we'll take your questions. And, there might be additional things that we need to cover if certain questions are asked. We'll see. The last thing I want to say before I do that is be sure to take a look through your settings. There's no possible way. And I used to try, hopefully you learn a thing or two as you do things over and over. And, I'm still a work in progress, but praise God, he's brought me a long way already. But I used to do it differently. I used to go through all the, the things one by one and say, okay, this setting does this app does this. And the problem with that is no one's going to remember it. It's not practical to expect you to remember all that. And yes, you can go back and listen on the podcast, but what might take you 20 to 30 minutes to find the right episode and then the right spot in the episode and all that, you could figure out with about 2 to 3 minutes of exploring for yourself. So I'm not going to go through every setting or even, an overview of settings for you. I'm just going to tell you, look through your settings and look through all the sub-menus in settings and all the different options, because there are lots of things that can be configured, both with VoiceOver and also just the general settings. You can change your screensaver, your sleep time, all sorts of things. Again, you can have profiles, and the profiles are great. I told you about profiles last week, and I left that in the recording because that was sort of an afterthought, but I wanted to make sure we covered that, and God reminded me of that. We need to talk about the profiles. So that's in the recording from last week. You can also use your Apple TV with HomeKit, which I mentioned briefly. You can tell, Siri to turn down the temperature, to unlock the door, whatever you have HomeKit accessories for. And of course, we're going to be dealing with that next week in our smart home sessions. But also, you can view camera feeds. There's a lot of that stuff that you can do. I would just encourage you to look through the settings. And there is an Apple TV user guide. The easiest way to find the user guides nowadays is in the Tips app, TIPS, which is on your iPhone and your iPad by default. If you have removed it for some reason, you can re-download it. You can also use Safari and just Google search for the user guide. I would put the words Apple Support in front of it. Apple Support, Apple TV user guide, because then you know that the first results are going to be from Apple Support, and that's what you want. But the easiest way is indeed just to use the Tips app. And so in the Tips app, if you just open it up and set your rotor to headings, you will find very quickly the user guide section. And there is absolutely a user guide for the Apple TV. Like I always share with you when we talk about user guides, I would encourage you to read the voiceover section first and then jump back to the beginning of the guide or other chapters of interest to you, because that makes sure you know how to operate the Apple TV properly with voiceover before you learn about other things.
Thanks for joining today's session. Didn't get your question answered? Have an additional comment or feedback? Email us info@ttjtech.biz or info@stiritup.com. And remember, stir is spelled with a U. That's STURITUP.com. Or check out our websites for additional resources. That's ttjtech.biz or stiritup.com. And remember, subscribe to the newsletter when you're there. That way, you don't miss out on any upcoming announcements or events. Thanks for joining us. God bless, and see you next time.